My family said, "You're not one of us anymore." Funny how quiet it got when I agreed. So last Sunday, I made my mom's favorite chicken pot pie from scratch. Took me 4 hours, 2 burns, and a small argument with the crust. I figured maybe if I showed up with something homemade, they'd finally see that I'm trying. Not to impress, just to belong. You'd think after 32 years, I'd have learned that family dinner in the Carter's house isn't really about food. It's about hierarchy. Who gets to speak, who gets ignored, and who gets served last. When I walked in, the air already smelled like takeout wings. My brother's usual choice. Mom smiled that distracted, half-polished smile she uses for neighbors she doesn't really like but has to tolerate. Dad didn't even look up from his phone. My brother, Brian, tossed a bag of fries onto the table and said, "Finally, real food." They laughed. The kind of laugh that makes you feel like maybe you missed the joke until you realize you are the joke. I tried to shake it off, poured some wine, kept my voice light. "So," I said, "just let me know when the family reunion is. I'll book early this time." My brother didn't even bother looking up. He just chewed, swallowed, and said, "You're not family, Em. Don't bother showing up." The room went dead quiet. And then they laughed. Not loud, not cruel, just that casual chuckle people use when cruelty's been normalized. Dad slapped the table. Mom covered her mouth pretending she was shocked, but her eyes said she wasn't. I smiled back. Because that's what you do when your heart's bleeding. You cover it with manners. No one said it was too far. Not even a soft "Brian, that's enough." Nothing. Just forks scraping plates and me trying to swallow both dinner and dignity. I don't remember tasting anything after that. All I remember is the sound of the clock. Steady, cold, and loud enough to measure how long it took for them to forget I existed. I used to think silence meant peace. That if I didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't make it worse, maybe they'd love me better. Turns out, silence just made me invisible. That night, I didn't throw the wine or shout. I just stood up, slid my coat on, and took the pie back with me like it was proof I'd tried. Walking to my car, I could still hear their laughter through the window. It hit me then. I'd spent years financing a love that was never coming back with interest. Rent, car payments, bailouts, emergencies. Every time I said yes, I thought I was buying belonging. Turns out, I was just funding their comfort. When I got home, the kitchen felt too clean, too quiet. I set the pie on the counter and stared at it. The crust had cracked, right down the middle, like it knew something I didn't. I laughed. That ugly, half-choked kind of laugh that sounds too close to crying. Then I sat down, opened my phone, and scrolled through our family group chat. Not one text from them, not even a fake apology. That was the night something in me, something I didn't even know had a name, finally broke. Not in a dramatic movie way, more like a silent snap. Like when a branch gives up after too much snow. I realized I could keep pretending, keep paying, keep shrinking, or I could stop. But here's the thing about stopping. People who fed off your yes will always call your no betrayal. And in that moment, I didn't care. I didn't even feel angry yet. Just empty. Empty and weirdly calm. Like the world had shifted 2 inches to the left, and all I could do was stand still and notice. I poured myself another glass of wine, even though I didn't want it, just to hold something warm. Outside, the snow had started falling. Soft, soundless, relentless. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like going back inside anyone's house to thaw. The first night after that dinner felt off. The apartment was too quiet, like the silence was trying to ask if I was sure about walking away. I left my phone on the counter just to see if anyone would call. No one did. By morning, I stopped checking. By day 3, it didn't even hurt anymore. It just felt like when you finally stop pressing on a bruise. Relief mixed with an ache that almost feels nostalgic. I kept thinking about what my brother said. "You're not family." The words replayed like an annoying jingle you can't shake off. It wasn't even the cruelty that got me. It was how casual it sounded, like he'd practiced it. Like he'd said it in his head 100 times before it finally came out of his mouth. I started replaying years of tiny moments that suddenly made too much sense. The missing groceries, the surprise emergency Venmo requests. The way my dad always said, "You're so responsible, Em." Right before asking for a temporary loan, responsible. I used to wear that word like a medal. Now it felt like a tag that read easiest to manipulate. Work helped at first. I buried myself in spreadsheets at the accounting firm, balancing numbers that always added up, unlike my family. But the quiet followed me everywhere, even into the elevator where the old jazz radio hummed like background guilt. One evening, my coworker Lisa asked if I was okay. I smiled, said something about family drama, and she nodded like she knew exactly what that meant. She told me her dad hadn't talked to her since she married a guy from a different church. Some families confuse control with love, she said, handing me a cookie from her lunchbox. It was a small thing, but it felt like someone had finally handed me permission to stop apologizing for my peace. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about the money. The more I scrolled through my banking app, the stranger it looked. Charges I didn't recognize. Transfers I didn't remember approving. One to a company called Evergreen Hardware Supply. I don't buy hardware. I barely own a hammer. I called the bank expecting it to be a glitch, but the woman on the line, polite, bored, said the transaction was authorized under my digital signature. I froze. I hadn't used my e-signature in months. That night, I pulled out my laptop and started combing through old statements, credit reports, even emails. The numbers were all there, neat, consistent, and damning. Someone had used my name, my social security number, and my credit to open a small business account. The owner, Brian Carter, my brother. My hands shook so bad I nearly dropped my coffee. At first, I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe he'd used my name to help process paperwork. Maybe it was an accident. But then I found an email thread between the bank and someone pretending to be me. Same email handle, same signature, just slightly off. My signature curled too neatly, like someone tracing my name through glass. I sat there staring at it, realizing this wasn't an accident. It was a pattern, a system. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house, not to confront them. I told myself it was just to return a set of keys I still had. When I got there, Mom was watering her garden, humming like life hadn't imploded 3 nights ago. She looked surprised to see me, but masked it with a smile too quick to be real. "Emily, honey, you look tired. Rough week?" I almost laughed. Rough didn't cover it. I told her about the unauthorized account, the forged signature, the company name that matched Brian's. She blinked, too many times. Then she sighed, like I'd just told her the car broke down again. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm sure it's just a mix-up. You know how Brian is with paperwork." "Yeah," I said, "I do." She looked down at her gloves. "You've always been so good with these things. Maybe you can help him sort it out." I stared at her for a long moment. "Mom, he committed fraud." She froze, mid-wipe on her gardening shears, then forced a small laugh. "Let's not use ugly words. He's family." I wanted to scream. Instead, I said nothing. Silence again, my old stupid habit. On the drive home, I pulled into a gas station just to breathe. I sat there watching people go in and out, couples arguing over snacks, a dad teaching his kid how to pump gas. Everyone just living their lives while mine was unraveling behind a mask of politeness. I finally called the number on the business listing for Evergreen Hardware. Brian picked up. His voice was casual, too casual. "Hey, Em, what's up?" I said, "You opened a company using my name." There was a pause, then, "It's not what it sounds like." "Oh, okay, because it sounds like identity theft." He exhaled sharply. "You're so dramatic. It's just a temporary setup. You have better credit. I was gonna tell you." "When? After you tanked it?" He scoffed. "Jesus, Em, it's family. You act like I'm some stranger." "You forged my signature." "And you'll get it back. Chill out." That's when it hit me. He didn't even feel guilty. He genuinely believed I should be fine with it. That's how far gone it all was. That night, I sat on my couch with my laptop open, staring at my credit score like it could give me back some sense of control. I thought about reporting it right away but stopped. I didn't want revenge. I wanted proof. Solid, undeniable proof. Not just of what he'd done, but of how long they'd been doing it. I dug deeper, traced transactions back 2 years. Every emergency payment, every favor, every temporary loan, all disguised as love, $20,000 worth of love. At some point, I looked around my apartment. The bills stacked neatly, the plants I'd somehow kept alive, the walls that never yelled at me, and realized this was the first time I felt safe in my own space. No guilt, no expectation, just me and the truth. Before going to bed, I wrote one sentence on a sticky note and stuck it to my laptop. If they'll fake your name, they'll fake your love. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Her name was Sarah Green. Sharp voice, calm energy. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, just the sound of her typing in the background. When I finished, she said, We'll handle it quietly. You document everything. Don't confront them again. You've been covering for them too long. Her tone was matter-of-fact, not cruel, but it landed like a diagnosis I didn't want to hear. That night, Lisa from work texted me a meme about dysfunctional families. Something about the family accountant who doubles as a scapegoat. I laughed so hard I cried. Then I poured myself tea, opened my files, and began organizing every receipt, every transfer, every call log into folders. Not out of rage, out of clarity. For once, the numbers finally made sense. When I finished, it was nearly midnight. I stood by the window, watching the snow pile up on the street lamps, glowing like quiet defiance. I didn't know what was coming next, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't their safety net anymore. I was my own firewall. You know that weird calm that hits you right before everything explodes? That was me, sitting in my tiny kitchen, sipping lukewarm coffee, while staring at the folder labeled Proof. I'd spent the last week collecting every screenshot, every transaction, every fake email with my signature. It was all there, a whole museum of betrayal, carefully curated by the people who swore they loved me. When my lawyer, Sarah, called that Monday morning, her voice was steady. "Emily, I had our forensic analyst look at the documents. It's confirmed. The signature's forged. Your brother's business is using your credit illegally. We'll file a cease and desist immediately." I felt something between nausea and relief. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. It's like my body decided emotions were a luxury I couldn't afford right now. Sarah told me to stay calm, not to confront them directly. They'll panic, let them. Guilt always shows its face before it fixes anything. I liked her already. She reminded me of the kind of teacher who never raises her voice. She just slides your graded paper across the desk and lets the red ink do the talking. By Thursday, the letter was sent. A clean, quiet bomb addressed to Evergreen Hardware Supply. Attention, Brian Carter. I didn't tell him. I didn't even warn my parents. I just let the silence work. That night, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. First a call from Mom, then Dad, then Brian, all ignored. Then came the texts. "What have you done?" from Dad. "You're overreacting," from Mom. And my favorite, "You'll regret this," from Brian. Yeah, sure. The same guy who thought using my name was a favor I should be grateful for. The next morning, I was halfway through my bagel when someone started pounding on my apartment door. Not knocking, pounding. The kind that rattles picture frames. I looked through the peephole and saw Dad's truck parked out front. My stomach dropped. I opened the door only halfway. Open this damn door," Dad barked. His face was red, not from worry, from anger. The kind of anger men get when they're not used to being told no. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "What am I?" "You sicked a lawyer on your own brother over a misunderstanding." "Forgery isn't a misunderstanding," he scoffed. "For God's sake, you think you're some victim? We've done everything for you." I almost laughed. "Yeah? Then why is my name on a loan for a business I don't own?" He looked away for half a second, just enough for me to know he knew. That silence told me more than any excuse ever could. Then Mom appeared behind him, wringing her hands. "Honey, please, you're taking this too far. We can fix this as a family." I said, "No, Mom, you mean you can hide it as a family. I'm done being your cleanup crew." Her eyes welled up, perfect tears, timed like a performance she's been rehearsing for years. "You're breaking this family apart." I smiled sadly. "No, Mom, I'm just refusing to hold it together with lies." They left eventually, not because they understood, but because I wouldn't open the door wider. When the truck pulled away, I just stood there shaking. I wasn't scared. I was done. Fully, completely done. That night, I sent Sarah a message. "Proceed with documentation." Her reply came back instantly. Already on it. Over the next few days, things got uglier. My brother posted some vague Facebook status about people who betray family for money. Classic deflection. My aunt called to check in, which was code for spy on me. I kept my answer short. "Yeah, I'm fine. No, I'm not discussing it." Then I hung up and blocked her number. The new version of me had a simple motto: block first, explain never. But the real twist came 2 days later. I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. The man introduced himself as Thomas Reed, a loan officer from Greenlight Financial. He said, "Miss Carter, we're following up to confirm your co-signature on a $15,000 business loan." My heart stopped. "Excuse me, what co-signature?" He hesitated. "You're listed as the guarantor for Evergreen Hardware, but we've already noticed some inconsistencies, so don't worry, you won't be held liable." That was it, the missing puzzle piece. They'd not only used my credit, they'd planned to sink it. I thanked him for calling, hung up, and sat in silence, just breathing. It wasn't anger anymore. It was disgust, the kind that settles in your bones. You know that feeling when you finally see someone's true face and realize they've been wearing a mask your entire life? That's what it was. The next morning, I printed every document and labeled each folder like a crime scene. Transfers. Forged loans. Family texts. The last one made me laugh out loud. Family texts. What a joke. Half of them were just requests for money dressed up as concern. I drove to Sarah's office downtown, a small brick building sandwiched between a yoga studio and a vape shop. The most American mix possible. She looked through my folders, nodded approvingly, and said, "We'll send a formal cease and desist to your brother and parents. We'll freeze your credit. And Emily," she paused, "don't answer their calls anymore. Let the paper speak." When I got home, my voicemail was full. Dad yelling, Mom crying, Brian alternating between begging and blaming. One message stood out, though, from a woman's voice. "Hi, Emily, this is Carly. I'm Brian's girlfriend. Or ex, I guess. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for all of it. You didn't deserve that." Her voice cracked near the end. "He's been drinking, blaming you for everything, but I know what he did." I replayed that message 3 times, not because I needed validation, but because it was the first time someone in that entire mess had said the words, "You didn't deserve that." That night, I opened a bottle of cheap red wine, sat on my balcony, and watched the streetlights flicker. My phone buzzed again, another call from home. I turned it face down and whispered to myself, "Let them panic." And oh, they did. The next morning, my dad showed up at my office. Can you imagine? In his work boots, red-faced, trying to look concerned. My boss intercepted him before he reached my desk. I watched from a distance as Dad tried to charm his way through the receptionist, talking about a family misunderstanding. My boss, a woman named Erica, who'd seen enough corporate chaos to spot manipulation in her sleep, just crossed her arms and said, "Sir, this is a place of business. You need to leave." I could have hugged her. When I got home that evening, a white envelope was taped to my door. No name, just thick paper, my family's kind of drama. Inside was a handwritten note. "We can fix this. Come home and let's talk. Don't embarrass us further. Signed, Dad." The word embarrass jumped off the page. Not hurt, not disappointed, embarrass. That's what it was all about. Their reputation. Their illusion of being the perfect family in a small town where people wave at each other but gossip like it's a sport. I folded the note carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and dropped it straight into the trash. Then I stood there for a second, breathing deep, realizing the power shift that had just happened. For the first time, I wasn't the one cleaning up their mess. I was the one holding the broom. So yeah, they wanted a war? Fine. But mine wouldn't be loud or messy. It would be paper trails, credit freezes, and silence sharp enough to cut. Justice wasn't always dramatic. Sometimes it was just a woman in her kitchen, sipping wine, letting her lawyer do the talking while her family fell apart trying to figure out when they lost control. And the best part? They never saw it coming. I didn't plan on moving in with Grandma. It just kind of happened after one too many nights of staring at the ceiling, wondering when silence turned from peaceful to heavy. My lease was up, my lawyer said things would take months, and Grandma's been asking me to visit since Christmas, the one I skipped to work overtime paying off someone else's bills. So I packed a few boxes, grabbed the cat, and drove 3 hours to her little yellow house outside Dayton. The kind of house that smelled like cinnamon and old wood, where time didn't rush, it just breathed. She was on the porch when I pulled up, wearing her faded Ohio State hoodie, holding a cup of coffee like it was a sacred ritual. "Well," she said, "if it isn't my favorite overthinker." I laughed for the first time in weeks. She didn't hug me right away. She just looked at me, really looked, like she was checking for cracks. "You look tired," she said softly. I told her, "I think that's my new personality." She chuckled, then said, "Good, means you're done pretending you're fine." The first few days were quiet. I helped her with chores, baked muffins we didn't really need, watched her soap operas where everyone's dramatic but still says darlin'. It was peaceful. And weirdly, that peace made me restless. After years of fixing everyone else's chaos, I didn't know what to do with the stillness. Some nights I'd lie awake, replaying everything. The dinner, the forged signature, the note on my door. There's this weird stage after betrayal where you stop asking why and start asking, who am I now? One morning, I found Grandma sitting at the kitchen table, sorting her bills with a pencil tucked behind her ear. "You know," she said without looking up, "your mom called." I froze mid-pour with the coffee pot. "Oh?" she nodded. Tried to act like she was just checking on me, but she slipped. Asked if you were here. "What'd you say?" I asked. She smiled. "Told her you were safe. That's all she needs to know right now." I sat down across from her. "She'll say I'm being dramatic." "She already did," Grandma said. "She also said you're tearing the family apart." I told her maybe it needed tearing. I laughed so hard I almost spit out my coffee. She grinned. "What, you think love means letting people rob your peace? Honey, love without respect is just manipulation with better lighting." That line stuck with me for days. Every time I felt guilty, which was often, I'd hear her voice again. She was right. I'd spent my whole life mistaking obligation for love. I said yes when I wanted to scream no, smiled when I wanted to walk out, paid debts that weren't mine because being needed felt safer than being ignored. But standing in Grandma's kitchen, watching her cut pie like she was solving an equation, I realized something simple. They only loved me when I was useful. About a week later, I finally picked up one of my mom's calls. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted closure, maybe I wanted to test if she'd changed, or maybe I was just bored. Her voice came through shaky, like someone trying to sound maternal for an audience. "Emily, honey, can we please just talk?" she said. "I'm listening," I replied. "You've made your point. We all made mistakes, but dragging lawyers into this? You're embarrassing your brother." I bit my lip so hard I tasted copper. "Mom, Brian committed a crime." She sighed, the same sigh she used when I didn't make honor roll. "He's family. Family forgives." "Funny," I said. "When he forged my name, did that count as family too?" There was silence. Then she whispered, "You've changed." "Yeah," I said. I finally grew a spine. I hung up. She called back 3 times. I didn't answer. Later that night, Grandma poured us both a glass of red wine and said, "So how'd that go?" I shrugged. "About as well as a root canal with no anesthesia." She nodded, then leaned back. "You know, when your grandpa left, everyone told me I should have forgiven him. That's what good wives do. But forgiveness isn't a free pass. It's a door you can only open from the inside. When you're ready to walk through it, not when someone else's guilt knocks." I asked her if she ever did forgive him. She smiled sadly. "Eventually, but I never let him move back in." We both laughed. That quiet kind of laugh that lives somewhere between pain and peace. The next few weeks felt like rehab for the soul. I took long walks, cooked dinner just because it smelled good, helped Grandma with her crossword puzzles. Sometimes we'd sit on the porch, and she'd say things like, "You remind me of myself at your age, minus the bad hair choices." I told her she was the only person who could roast me and heal me in the same sentence. She winked. "That's love, kiddo, the real kind." But healing isn't linear. One afternoon, while organizing mail, I found an envelope addressed to Grandma. Handwriting I knew too well. My mother's. I hesitated before handing it over. Grandma opened it slowly, read the first few lines, and passed it to me. Inside was a short note. "We miss you both. Tell Emily we love her. She'll always be our daughter, but she's made this harder than it had to be." I felt that sting in my chest again. Not from the words "we love her," but from harder than it had to be. The guilt grenade. Classic. Grandma took the note from my hands, ripped it in half, and said, "Love that comes with a guilt trip is just manipulation in a prettier envelope." Then she tossed it in the trash. Don't keep letters that rewrite your truth. That night, sitting by the window, I realized something had shifted. I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. Anger had burned out, leaving behind clarity. My family wasn't evil. They were just broken, stuck in a loop of pride, control, and denial. And for the first time, I didn't want to fix them. I just wanted to stop being collateral damage. The next morning, I wrote an email to Sarah, my lawyer, confirming I wanted to finalize the case. No negotiations. Then I made pancakes for Grandma, played Fleetwood Mac on her old radio, and let the sunlight hit the kitchen table like forgiveness. Before breakfast ended, Grandma said something I'll never forget. "You stopped being their ladder, Em, so now they're calling you a wall. Don't take it personal. It's just gravity finally doing its job." We both laughed, but I felt tears sting my eyes. Not from sadness, but from recognition. For years, I climbed every problem they handed me. Now, I was finally learning to stand still and let them feel the fall. And for the first time in forever, I wasn't the one who needed saving. It had been almost 3 months since I left home, and the world felt quieter. Not empty, just lighter. The lawsuit was moving along quietly, my credit was frozen, and my lawyer handled the noise so I didn't have to. Most days I worked from Grandma's dining table, sunlight spilling across the old wood like forgiveness. She'd hum old songs, feed the neighbor's cat, and occasionally remind me, peace is work too, you know. Then one morning, an envelope showed up in the mailbox. Cream-colored, expensive paper. My stomach dropped the second I saw the handwriting. My father's neat, rehearsed cursive. The kind of writing meant for signatures and apologies that aren't really apologies. Inside was an invitation. The Carter family reunion, Lakeside Resort. A line at the bottom. It's time to talk face to face. Let's make things right. I laughed out loud. Not the happy kind, the disbelieving kind. After everything, the fraud, the silence, the threats, now they wanted a family meeting at a lake resort? Like trauma could be fixed over buffet shrimp and matching t-shirts. Grandma was slicing apples when I showed her the card. She glanced at it, then said, "That's not a reunion, honey. That's a performance." "You think I should go?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. "Depends," she said. "Do you still need to be heard, or are you finally okay with just being seen by yourself?" That question sat with me all week. The reunion was scheduled for Saturday. By Friday night, I still hadn't decided. Then out of nowhere, my phone buzzed. A text from Carly, my brother's ex. "Just a heads up, they're saying you might show up. Be careful, they're not looking for peace, they're looking for a photo op." That sealed it. I wasn't going, but I was going to make sure they understood I was done playing their games. Saturday came bright and clear. Grandma and I spent the morning baking cinnamon rolls. Around noon, my phone started blowing up. Missed calls, voicemails, even a group text from my mom. A photo of everyone smiling at the resort. Dad, Brian, a few cousins, the usual crowd. And right there, in the middle of the table, was an empty chair, my chair. The message underneath read, "Missing our girl today." It was supposed to be sentimental, but something about it hit different. That empty chair wasn't guilt anymore. It was proof. Proof that I didn't need to sit at that table to exist in their story. I stared at the photo for a long minute, then typed a reply. "Glad you saved me a seat. Hope you enjoy the show. I prefer peace to performances." Then I muted the thread and slid my phone face down on the counter. Later that afternoon, Grandma poured us coffee and said, "You finally look free." "I think I am," I told her. For the first time in my life, their silence feels like a gift. A week passed before the next call came. Mom again. Her voice was softer this time, less rehearsed. "Emily, I just wanted to say thank you." "For what?" I asked. "For forgiving me, for protecting yourself. I think I understand now what you meant." I didn't say anything. She continued, "Your dad's angry, Brian's drinking again, everything's falling apart. But I keep thinking, maybe it needed to. Maybe we built too much on your back." That was the first time she'd ever admitted that out loud. I felt my throat tighten. "Mom," I said quietly, "you don't need to fix it for me, just don't let it happen again." She cried softly, and before hanging up whispered, "I love you, even if we didn't deserve you." When the call ended, I didn't cry. I just sat there in stillness. The kind that feels like the world finally exhaling with you. That night, I printed a photo I'd taken a few days earlier. Grandma and me on the porch, her arm around me, sunlight washing the frame. I put it in a small wooden frame and set it on my kitchen table, right where that empty chair used to be in the family photo. Then I pulled up a spare chair and placed it beside the photo. Not for them, for me. For whoever came next in my life. A friend, a partner, someone who showed up without expecting anything but honesty. I wanted that seat to always remind me that love doesn't demand space. It earns it. The next morning, I wrote my final letter, one I never planned to send but needed to write. It said, "Dear family, I forgive you, but I'm done auditioning for your love. I'm not angry anymore, just done paying the price for other people's comfort. I wish you healing, but from afar. The door isn't locked, but it only opens for respect." I signed it, folded it neatly, and tucked it into the back of my journal. Some words are meant to stay unsent. They just need to leave your chest. Months later, life looked different. I got a promotion. I adopted another cat. Grandma started teaching me her pie recipes in case she ever goes viral on TikTok and can't bake for fans anymore. We laughed so hard that day, I almost dropped the rolling pin. One evening, I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker like slow-moving stars. I thought about everything. the betrayal, the court filings, the silence. And I realized something simple. Peace doesn't come when everyone says sorry. It comes when you stop waiting for them to. So yeah, my family still has their reunions, their group photos, their empty chair. But that chair isn't a symbol of what they lost. It's a reminder of what I found: boundaries, self-respect, and a life that finally fits. I raised my glass of cheap wine to the night sky and whispered, "To the empty chair, may it stay empty." And for the first time, that thought didn't hurt. It felt like freedom. You know, looking back now, I think the hardest part wasn't walking away from them. It was walking back to myself. For so long, I thought love meant sacrifice, that being the strong one was a compliment. But real strength isn't bleeding quietly for people who call it love. It's standing up, even when your voice shakes, and saying, "This isn't love anymore." What I've learned is that boundaries don't destroy relationships. They reveal which ones were real. Some people only show up when you're useful. Others stay even when you've got nothing to give. The first group teaches you lessons. The second reminds you what peace feels like. I used to think closure came from apologies, but it doesn't. It comes the moment you decide to stop waiting for one. Life's too short to keep setting yourself on fire just to keep others warm. The truth is, what you allow is what will continue. And once you stop allowing disrespect, even from family, you start to rebuild yourself in the quiet. That's where I found my peace. Not in revenge, not in proving them wrong, but in finally choosing me. They reached out weeks later. They said they were sorry. I forgave them. But this time, on my terms. So if you've ever been made to feel like your worth depends on how much you give, remember this: gold doesn't beg to shine. It just does. If this story spoke to you, share your thoughts below. Tell me about the moment you realized your peace mattered more than someone else's comfort. Hit like if it resonated, and subscribe for more stories about strength, second chances, and the quiet kind of justice we all deserve. Take care of your heart tonight. Peace really does look good on you.